Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome to another episode of the Solfate podcast, where we talk with builders and founders, normally in the Solana ecosystem. Today, we had a very interesting guest on, something more unique that we've typically talked about on the show. Who do we have on the show today, James?
Today we talked with Lixin from Keystone, which is, if you don't know Keystone, it's a hardware wallet and it's fantastic. So this was an interesting one because we normally stick for two reasons, right? We normally stick to software, we normally stick to Solana, and while the discussion was primarily focused on Solana, Keystone serves most
Multi-chain wallet.
blockchains, right? Sort of starting with an emphasis on Bitcoin and then sort of branched out into other chains. That being said, it is my favorite wallet, right? Like this is not advice because I'm not going to be responsible for anyone like what people use to
Do your
secure
own
their
research.
funds. But like Keystone is definitely my favorite hardware wallet, and I love Lixin's recommendations for how to use it securely.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't even recommend that you use only a Keystone wallet, right? Like he recommended that people have a ledger and a Keystone and maybe even a third as well to set up a multi-sig between three different types of hardware wallets. So hearing that just on its own made me trust him a little bit more because he's not just over here shilling his product. He's like, no, you should absolutely spread your security around to multiple things so that the cost of hacking you is just exorbitantly high and no one will is
Yeah.
sort of the idea.
Yeah, it was honestly very surprising. Like typically a lot of founders they'll be like, "Oh, use my product and stuff." And like there was some of that. Like we talked about the Keystone wallet itself. Like it's a, if you're on the video, here's my Keystone. I've got my sweet Mad Lad there. I get double on the background. And it's like it's a very interesting take on hardware wallets where for one, it has a 3-4 inch touchscreen, which is really, really nice for user experience, but it's all air gapped. So like when you interact with it, it's over QR codes. But like we talk about a bunch of stuff, and largely every time we would ask Lixin something, it was his answer was never like, I'm going to shill Keystone. It was get educated and practice basic security, and you can be a more secure user using any hardware wallet. Keystone is one of those options, which is like a phenomenal response, especially when like the Keystone, which James and I both learned this, the Keystone wallet has 3 secure elements inside of every single device. And so like if a hacker hacks
Each
your
of which
hardware,
is different, right?
yes, each of which is a different secure element.
Yeah.
So effectively if like a hardware hacker tries to hack your Keystone wallet, they effectively have to hack 3 devices at the same time in order to gain access to your seed phrase and your assets, which is insanely fucking cool.
Yeah. I mean, hear it when you actually see a Keystone, right? And think about the cost. It's actually like incredibly reasonable, like low hundreds, like 120,
Yeah.
$130, something like that. Which I'm not saying is not a steep cost for some. For many people, like that is an exorbitant cost. That being said, when you think about what goes into the device, that the 4-inch touchscreen, the camera for scanning QR codes, 3 secure elements, like there is a lot of stuff in there. It is the level of complexity of a cell phone, right? And that's the cost. That's the cost of a low end cell phone. If we're being completely honest here. So anyway, we've already talked a lot about this. I think we should just get into it and let people hear from Lixin himself. It's a great conversation. Go ahead and listen. Before we dive in, just want to have a sort of a brief shout out to the projects and sponsors that we interact with. Firstly, Phantom. Phantom is sort of the preferred wallet of the Solfate ecosystem. We love working with Phantom. They're freaking awesome to interact with.
Yeah,
it's
great
definitely
team,
my
great
sort
product.
of daily hot wallet that I use. We need to shill the dev list, right? Like we don't talk about the dev list enough.
Yeah. We could talk about the dev list.
If you're a developer and
too.
you're not, yeah, if you're a developer and you're not on the dev list, go to our website and get on the dev list, right? Like there's links in the show notes. Get on the dev list. We are trying to make sure that airdrops go to the devs, We want the devs to get all the great things from the Solana ecosystem. Anything else on the dev list, Nick?
No, that's pretty much it. You can find out all the information at solfate.com/devlist.
Sick. And then lastly, I'd just like to point out Unboxed. Unboxed is a dev shop that works in the crypto ecosystem, specifically the Solana ecosystem. My caveat there is I am the owner of Unboxed, so I of course am biased. That being said, if you like me and if you're listening to the show, hopefully you don't
James
hate
is okay.
me. You might trust sort of the work that I and my team can produce. So feel free to reach out and contact us. We're here to help out with all your crypto related dev needs. But with that, let's jump into the show.
Yeah, let's get to it. Nothing in this podcast is or should be considered financial advice. Any opinions and thoughts expressed are solely those of the individual. They do not represent the opinions of any entity. Enjoy.
So, Lixin, I'd love to hear a little bit about you and your background. Maybe, just for the sake of listeners, could you maybe give the quick elevator pitch for Keystone? I think hopefully most of our listeners know what Keystone is, but like 30 to 60 seconds, what is Keystone? And then we'll roll back and talk about you personally, and then we'll sort of come back into Keystone.
Okay, of course. Thank you so much. So first, Keystone is a hardware wallet. And we came from the Bitcoin Maxis community and get into Web3, including Ethereum, EVM, and Solana. And the biggest selling point for Keystone is that we are strictly focusing on hardware wallet, which means that we're integrating Keystone with many software wallets, like MetaMask. We're official hardware wallet partner of MetaMask. And also we're official hardware partner of Solfate. You guys can try out that. It's really good. And also one of the key points of Keystone is we want to maximize the security as well as protecting the user experience of the product, of the user. And also we have one of the key features is that we can use QR code to scan your software wallet to get the unsigned and signed the transaction, which means that in the total life cycle of the product, it's totally offline. So it's more secure than USB cable and things like that. And also we have other very core features. For example, you can hold 3 recovery phrases in one device, which means that if you wanted to separate your assets into 3 different wallets, you can use one hardware wallet to manage all of them. So there are a lot of security features as well as user experience features. And also another selling point or another cool feature of the product is it comes with a 4-inch touchscreen. So we see that user experience is part of the security rather than just technical security. We wanted to maximize the user experience to make sure that people make less mistakes rather than tap fingers on small buttons with a small screen. So we have a lot of thinkings and security setups for the product. And you guys can check out our website, Keyst.1, KEYST.1 to check out the product, more features and also our roadmap and coming integrations with other software wallets. Thank you so much.
That's amazing. I love Keystone. Of all the hardware wallets I've interacted with, I'm not going to lie, it's been my favorite. I haven't used
best
all
user experience
hardware wallets, but like you said, definitely the best UX.
Yeah, thank you so
Nick's
much.
Nick's holding is up for those who aren't on video.
Yeah, for anyone who's watching on the video, this is mine. You can see my sweet Mad Lad. Got the double there. Having the touchscreen on the hardware wallet itself is so amazing for the user experience, and you can just display more information. So you can inherently, in many ways, you can just have a better user experience and provide additional security. You can show more information to the user. Vice on a Ledger Nano S, which is one of the most popular hardware wallets, super tiny screen, and you have 2 buttons and that's it. And it's really hard to have good security for users that are not super in depth, super technical onto things. So yeah, it's really interesting. Plus the QR code airgapped stuff is really interesting. I would love to talk more about that in a couple of minutes.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Actually, there's a big user research behind that. Actually,
I'm fascinated to hear more about that. In fact, let's just go ahead and do that. We can circle back on personal background later. Tell us about it.
Of course. So actually, when I was designing, first of all, my background is a hardware product manager, and I was working on one of the biggest drone company before, and we were invested by Snapchat, and it's a big company right now actually called Hover. So I was the second employee of that company, and I went through the whole from 0 to 1 process of the product as well as the company. So I did tons of research for building Keystone. And at that time, actually, I interviewed a lot of whales around the world, and all of them, they're using Ledger, obviously. So one of the key reasons I asked them was that, what's the most anxious time when you're using Ledger? So obviously, the first part of the anxious moment is that they were trying to input their recovery phrase into the device, which is making them extremely nervous about how to use the product. And the second most anxious time was that every time they're trying to plug their Ledger into their laptop, because you don't know what's going on within the USB cable. When you are not using Ledger, it's just an offline device. You put it there, you put it in a safe, or put it there anywhere in your drawer, and nothing will happen to that hardware wallet. Nothing will happen to your recovery phrase. But when you are plugging your Ledger into a laptop, you don't know what's going on. So we truly believe that trust. If we deliver a hardware wallet, trust is really, really important, and the trust comes from transparency. This is also why we open source every line of code we wrote, and also this is also the reason we use QR code. And also the QR code is totally open source. You can use open source tools on GitHub to review this QR code, whether it contains any private key or any sensitive information. So one of the key messages we want to send to the community is that you sign what you see. This is really important, rather than like blindly trust something closed source or blindly trust something within the USB cable. So this is the core. You can see that's the design philosophy behind the product, and that's why we tried really hard to do the QR code, because if you put a camera on a device, it will significantly raise the cost of the product. So we did tons of work to keep that product under like $150. So a lot of engineering effort in that too.
That's amazing. I didn't realize all the code was open source. We have a lot of developers in our audience. We can absolutely add this to the show notes as well, but do you know the name of your GitHub org where we can find that code?
Yeah, I think if there are a lot of developers of the audiences, another thing I can mention is that most of our code is in Rust language, which means that we realize Rust language in embedded system, which is very rare, but we did a lot of work on that to realize that, to make sure that this is the most robust code on this planet.
That's awesome. Where can developers find the open source code?
Just GitHub. I think GitHub / Keystone HQ. Yeah.
Keystone HQ.
Okay. Either way, we'll have a link for it in the show notes. That way everyone can easily go through it and take a look.
It is Keystone HQ. Here it is.
Keystone
I'm looking at all of it. Yeah. I love it.
Nice.
That's sweet. I'm gonna take a dive in there myself.
Thank you.
Well, Lixin, you mentioned a little bit of your background, right? You mentioned that you were the second employee at Hover, right? Hover, that's the drone company camera. Yeah. That's way cool, by the way. I think I've seen some stuff about Hover, in the past. So that's awesome. What was your transition? Could you tell us more about your transition, into crypto?
Okay, of course. Actually, I knew Bitcoin quite early when I was in college. That's the Christmas around 2009. That's the first time I read at that time, I was a heavy user of Google Reader. I still remember that around the Christmas of 2009, my Google Reader was flooded by information about Bitcoin at that time. So that's the first time I knew Bitcoin. I thought it was so cool, but I didn't think that the consensus would be reached. So that's the first time I saw Bitcoin, but I missed Bitcoin. And then I started my own startup in Shanghai in 2013, 2012, and 2013. My partner, they were both from Stanford University. And around the spring of 2013, I think that's the time that Bitcoin price goes from $10 to $100. And they told me, hey, Lixin, you should check out Bitcoin. And I checked it out again, and I surprisingly found that the consensus seems to be reached. So that's the first time I bought my Bitcoin on Mt. Gox. So that's the first Bitcoin I bought, which is 2013, about 4 years later. Yeah, 4 years later. So my experience about crypto is like 4 years cycle also. And at that time, I was working on the drone company. And we were invested by Snapchat, and we are selling worldwide, and we are also selling into offline Apple store. So a lot of like exposures of that product. And also that's a big like growth for my personal experience of making hardware and selling hardware worldwide. And in 2017, my wife was pregnant. So I left that company, because I was in Beijing at that time. So I left that company and came back to Shanghai. So in Shanghai, and then I was incubated by one of the biggest miners here in China, which is the co-founder of F2 Pool, which is still one of the biggest mining pool for Bitcoin right now. So I was incubated by him to making hardware wallet, and that's how I got into hardware wallet. I got into like my working experience in crypto and got into hardware wallet. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. So like 4 years like a cycle, 2009, 2013, and 2017, I started building Keystone.
Okay.
The current version, sorry, go ahead, Nick.
No, go ahead, James.
I was just going to say the current version of Keystone is version 3. Is that right? Right. So what was, I've not experienced what it was like before this version. So I'm curious, what was the first version like? So what was, or maybe
question.
even before that, like the prototype, right? It's like, what was
a great question.
I'd love to hear about the process and iteration.
Okay.
You know?
Okay. That's cool. That's a great question. That's a really great
especially
question.
for hardware. Like people don't have much information about hardware, especially like, we're typically software devs in this ecosystem. So the hardware side is very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's also like for you guys, it just suddenly it comes out a hardware wallet, but it comes to the third generation, and you didn't saw the first generation and the second generation. I would love to disclose more information about that. So because I was mentioning that I was incubated by one of the biggest miners, Bitcoin miners here in China. So the first version, we were targeting the miners here in China. And those miners, because they are building mining farms, and all those mining farms, they're in the most isolated places in China, like Sichuan or Xinjiang, everywhere. And the environment was very brutal, those places, either a lot of rain or either like most of like isolated places. So at that time, we were building a hardware wallet, and we were focusing on not only technical security, but also physical security, which means that hardware wallet comes with a metal case. It comes with a metal case just like a safe. And within the metal case, it's waterproof, it's drop resistant and everything. It also passed the military standard of, I don't remember the name, but one of the military standard of waterproof and drop resistant. And also for that product, when you put that in the metal case, I even drove my car over the device, and you can open the device and use the device. So that product was targeting, the miners here in China, because we were very familiar with them. But that was 2017. So we launched the product at the end of 2018. But the problem was that at that time, the bear market came. And the miners here in China, actually, it's not a very huge community here in China for the miners. They are big whales, but they're not and our business model was just selling hardware wallet. So it was not a great start at that time for our first generation. And in 2019, I went to the Bitcoin conference in San Francisco, Bitcoin 2019, and I met a lot of Bitcoiners. At that time, I showed them the first generation of Keystone. I showed them the first generation. But the problem was that they told me that it was so expensive. The price was almost like $500 for a hardware wallet, because I put so many like physical protection features into that device. So it was super expensive. It also comes with the aluminum case of the device. But they like the idea of airgap. They love the idea of QR code. They love the idea that it comes with a touch screen for better user experience. So after I came back from San Francisco, we started building the second generation. So the second generation, the change of the second generation was that first we need to do cost down. So that price will come down from around $500 to $169 at that time. And also another big change is that we were no longer targeting the miners here in China. We were targeting the Bitcoin masses, mostly in the United States. You know that those guys, they're super paranoid about security. And also at that time, Ethereum was not a big thing. So we were working with the Bitcoiners. And by the way, our CTO Aaron is also one of the co-authors of BIP 129, he's really proud of that. That is about a Bitcoin improvement proposal about Bitcoin multi-sig. So we were heavily into the core Bitcoin community, improving the Bitcoin multi-sig, also bringing the air gap, and also we collaborate with other software wallets developers to establish the QR code standard, because we're using an open source QR code. So after we finalize the QR code standard, if you are a software wallet developer, you just adopt that QR code standard, and then your users can use that with Keystone. So we did a lot of this kind of work, multi-sig, QR code, air gap, all these things, and all those educations in Bitcoin community with our second generation. So that's our second, because if you were not in those Bitcoin Maxis community, you didn't heard of the second generation. And for the third generation, we came into Web3. And for the third generation, the first biggest milestone is that we integrate with MetaMask. So we were one of the official hardware wallet partner of MetaMask. If you, maybe you don't remember, I think in 2021, Ledger and the MetaMask, they're like twice or three times broken change between Ledger and MetaMask. So people cannot use them together due to some changes of the Chrome browser. So at that time, MetaMask, they wanted to develop another hardware wallet support. And because Keystone, and also the co-founders of MetaMask, they were they were keeping a close eye on the Bitcoin community, because those guys are very paranoid. Those guys really want to, they want to stay inside. They want the best security. So that's how we came into the eyes of the co-founders of MetaMask. And also we were open source. So we quickly set up the partnership with MetaMask, and then get into Web3, integrate with MetaMask. And then we got into Solana. We integrate with Solfate. And right now we're also talking to Phantom and the Backpack to get more software wallet integrated, and also to give user better user experience. So that's basically the story behind the first, second, and third generation of the device.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thank you for all that information on the background of the hardware wallets. I think, yeah, it's really interesting to see like the progression. And so the version 1 and version 2 were basically solely focused on Bitcoin and nothing else. And then the current one, the version 3, is the one that added multiple chain supports and being able to interact that way. Yeah, that's the gist. Okay.
Yeah, actually, the biggest pity for me is that we totally missed the DeFi summer of Ethereum. Yeah, we got into Web3 so late. Yeah, if we got into as early as like Ledger in early 2020 or things like that, things would be totally different. Yeah, I mean, the people, when a company or a business gets early, then, they definitely get a stronger foothold. One of the things I'm super curious about for the hardware side is the secure element within the device. Can you talk about how the secure element works, and like specifically the one that you guys use, and then broadly some of those like security concerns that you would have as a hardware manufacturer for such a device like this? Okay, thank you so much. So we think that, so I think because most of the audiences, they're developer, we all know that about security, there's no like absolute security on this planet, right? So you cannot make something that's unhackable or impossible to get hacked. So everything we do for someone who's working on security, everything we do is trying to build up the cost for a hacker to hack us, right? So no matter what you do, you're doing this, but you cannot make something that's unhackable. So behind this philosophy, one of the most important thing, because security element is one of the most important thing, one of the most protector within the hardware wallet. So if we wanted to really build up the cost for a hacker to hack the device, one simple thing we could do is we can use more secure elements to protect the recovery phrase and other security information. And that's the very basic design philosophy of using 3 security elements. But here, another point I need to mention is that if we're using the same type of secure elements, that doesn't work, because that's still a big single point failure. If they can hack one of them, then they can hack 3 of them. So we are using 3 different secure elements from 2 different vendors. And I cannot, you cannot use, just like if you're doing multi-sig, if you're using one hardware wallet, a same type of hardware wallet to do multi-sig, that's not something you should do, because let's say if you're only using Keystone, let's say if we have a multi-sig, if you're using 3 Keystone to do the multi-sig, that's not a good practice. You should use 3 different hardware wallets, like Keystone and Ledger and Trezor. So you should avoid the possibility of the single point failure in your setup for security. And that's the reason we use 3 secure elements, and they are totally different types of secure elements and come from 2 international vendors. I cannot recall the name of the vendors. We can share with you the information, and you can put that in the show notes. And also you can find the information on GitHub and our blogs. Yeah.
I'm curious. Is there a way to know? Yeah. Well, I'm curious. Is there a way to know which secure element you have? Right. So like, could I get multiple Keystones and to know that they have different secure elements?
You mean you want to verify we're using 3 different secure elements? Is that correct?
I think what Lixin is saying. I think what he's saying is every single Keystone device has 3 individual secure elements on the one device.
There's 3 on one. Got it. I misunderstood that.
Yeah.
So every single one has 3 different secure elements.
Yeah. And 3 different secure elements.
Is it using all 3 at the same time? Is it taking
does
data
it like
and
split the seed phrase into all 3 elements?
Just for example, you put some private key here and use crypto to encrypt that, and you need these 3 secure elements to work together to sign a transaction. And this also means that if a hacker, they want to hack you, they need to hack all of them.
All 3.
And then they can hack you. Yeah, all 3.
That's freaking cool.
That's super cool. How do you actually like store, like I'm assuming you just break up the seed phrases on each of those 3 elements, and then like a Schmear cipher sort of situation where you just break them up. Like each element just stores a portion of the seed phrase or the private key at least. And then when you go to sign a transaction, the software on the actual, or I guess the firmware on the actual ledger or the Keystone device handles the all 3 elements working together to sign the transactions.
Yeah, correct.
Dang, that's cool.
Actually, we have a blog about that. I can share a blog talking about
please. I would love to read
behind the 3 secure elements, and you will know how does that work.
That's cool. How do you guys handle like the security side for logistics? Like, so you're like the devices get manufactured in some factory and then they get shipped out from somewhere. Like I've heard in the past people buying other hardware wallets online. It's the typical only buy from the manufacturer's website. That way you get like the official one. You don't get a tampered one from, some random Amazon seller sort of thing. Do you guys do any special security measures for your logistics chain, your manufacturing facilities?
Okay. I think there are 2 problems we need to solve. The first problem is, for example, I'm a hacker and I swap the device. You order Keystone and I some kind of hack your information and I send you a fake device. That's the first problem we need to tackle. To tackle that problem, we have a process called device verification, which means that you can go to our website, you use Keystone to scan a QR code, and our website at the backend, it was the HSM of AWS. So we're using the HSM of AWS to verify if you're using if you're using not a fake device. So this is something we do. We also have a blog talking about that. So that's the first thing. You need to make sure, and all these three elements, the three secure elements work in that process too, to make sure that this device is a real device rather than a fake device. That's really important. That's the first thing we do. And the second thing we do is, how do we protect the shipping information of the users, of our customers? That's really, really hard, because for us, we're making the hardware wallet, we're selling the hardware wallet, but we cannot have our own people to do all the logistics. We have to leverage UPS. We have to leverage the warehouses in the States to do that. But what we do is that from our side, every 60 days, we will delete all the shipping information of our customers, which means that you buy this device today, and after 60 days, we will delete your shipping information. And if you receive the device, you are satisfied with the device, you don't have any dispute about the device, you can send us an email to support@keystone.one, and we will immediately delete your shipping information. So this is how we protect that information. We need that to make sure that we won't, no matter what happened, the hacker won't get that information from us. So this is the thing we do on our end. This is really important. And also, if you go to our website, another thing you can see is that we're the only hardware wallet that doesn't collect your email for newsletter, which is not very good for marketing perspective, but we don't do that because we wanted to collect as little as information from our customer. So we don't collect emails for newsletter. We don't send you any newsletters about our product, anything like that. We only put our information on Twitter. So this is the thing. These are the things we're doing to protect the logistic things, and also to make sure that our users, they receive the real device rather than fake ones.
That actually, the device verification was one of my favorite things when setting up the Keystone when I got it last summer. That was it was actually one of my biggest concerns, and has always been one of my biggest concerns with hardware wallets is, how do I, even if I trust the entity that's producing this, there are multiple entities involved in the supply chain and delivery process. And how am I supposed to trust all of those entities, especially when most of them I don't know, right? So for example, I don't know who handles assembling your devices. Right. I don't know who those entities are. How am I supposed to even trust them? So having some code that verifies that this hasn't been tampered with in the supply chain process is really cool, and made me feel a lot more comfortable with it. I obviously even then tried to be smart about it and just sort of carve off a small amount of resources to put on the device and leave it there for a while, and that kind of thing. I am curious. Is the device verification code, is that also open source? Is that also something I can find on your GitHub?
Yeah, it's open source.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that aspect of it, because ultimately the entire sort of ethos of crypto is to verify personally, right? It's all about self-custody.
Yeah. Don't trust and
it's
verify.
hard, and it's hard to call something self-custody when it's not a device you created yourself. But also, we live in a complex enough world that nobody, or very few people, are actually assembling their own hardware wallets. It's technically possible, right? There are a couple of electrical engineers who are, like have the chops to buy some open source stuff and make their own hardware wallet. But the vast majority of us are ultimately going to need to decide, who do we trust to create these things for us, and how do we get comfortable with that, right? And so the past, I'd say really 6 months, I've been trying to get comfortable, with my Keystone that I got. And so I actually was looking forward to this conversation in large part to pick your brain about the information you've already volunteered, right? Which is, how do we verify things? How do we go about making this device secure? How do we go about securing your information? So this is really great. I'd love, because of how involved in the security business basically you are, I'd love to hear what your suggestions for security would be for a first-time crypto user. So let's say someone just started dabbling in crypto this past month, and they're only using a software wallet right now, and they're saying, "Hey, I think I want to get more involved here, but I need to get comfortable with how to secure my assets before I put a lot of assets on chain." What would you or Keystone, right, suggest in terms of, learning how to secure your assets properly? You already alluded to some of it with talking about multi-sig across 3 separate devices, but I'm curious, are there stages to security that you would recommend? What would be your recommendations for new users?
Okay, I think that's a great question. I think the first step for a user is that you'd better dive into some security accidents, like typical security accidents before. So not only for example, there are a lot of phishing sites right now. You need to learn that how to identify a phishing site. And also you need to learn that whether the security experts, security researchers on Twitter you should follow. I think that's the very first step for protecting yourself. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that you should not put all your assets in one wallet. That's also very important, because usually, in the EVM ecosystem, you may give your authority of your wallet to some protocols or projects, over authority for that. And people may move your assets because of that. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is, I strongly suggest that if you have a significant amount of money on crypto, you should have a wallet, have a hardware wallet, and because the biggest reason, so from a technical perspective, the biggest the biggest improvement for security of using a hardware wallet is that you are isolating your private key from your computer or from your mobile phone. That's really important, because from a security perspective, the more complicated a product is, the less security the product is. So that's a very basic thing for security. So if you isolate your private keys from your devices, either computer or your mobile phone, that's one of the biggest steps for improving your security. And the last but not the least, I still should mention that I always mention that in different podcasts. So hardware wallet or any tools for scam sniffers or anything like that, that's not the ultimate protection for your security. And also hardware wallet is not the silver bullet for your security, but your knowledge is the ultimate protection for your security, for your assets. You should learn more about security. You should learn more about how the blockchain works. You should learn more about the schemes of different product protocols. And then you will see, for example, if you're interacting with Solana, you should learn that how those things works under the hood. And then how should I verify a transaction? How should I protect me from any malicious projects or scammers? So again, the knowledge is the most important thing for protecting yourself, and always DYOR, and always don't trust but verify. That's really important. Yeah.
That obviously, I mean, first, thank you. I think every one of those things you mentioned is incredibly sensible. The sort of follow up I have here is that obviously puts a lot of responsibility on the end user, right? What are some of your favorite resources to help, right? So it's like, as part of that learning, you mentioned, for example, follow security researchers on Twitter, those kinds of things. It's like, where would these new people go to learn these sorts of things? Does the Keystone blog have this kind of information that can be a launching platform? Do you have a favorite person that you follow on Twitter that people should go look at? Like, what are some of these resources that you think are useful?
I think the most, for me, because I'm not a daily user, so maybe my recommendation is not perfect for a newcomer of Solana or newcomer of security. But I do find that because for Solana, we're collaborating with Solflare. Solflare, one of the co-founders of Solflare is Vic, and he's really good on security. And also he wrote really good code for their software wallet. I think that's definitely one of the guys the newcomers need to follow. And also we have Sam from Paradigm, which is one of the co-founders of Paradigm. And he's so strong for security. And he also did a lot of work on security. And also if you are I'm not sure for Solana, but for Ethereum, there's some Telegram groups called ETH security. And people should follow that. It's not because the security is very common. It's not like specific security for Solana, specific security for Bitcoin. So you can learn from other communities. You can learn from those like typical tactics of those hackers, how they hack people. That's really informational. And also for some blogs, I think Keystone, for us, we're going to launch a series of blogs about some like basic knowledge about security. But we're starting that from China because we're in China here, and we're using like Chinese users as a like pilot group of people. So we want to do more education for them, and we will have like online sessions for them to improve their security. And after we polish our like causes very well, and then we will open that we'll turn that into English, and we'll open that to the Western users.
Awesome. I just want to say, not only do I agree that we can learn about security from other ecosystems, I want to encourage that for listeners, right? It's
absolutely.
Like the Bitcoin community, the ETH community, regardless of how you feel about those assets, they have been around longer than Solana, for example, right? Like they have experienced more attacks than we have by nature of them being popular and being around for a very long time, right? And a lot of those, right, like a lot of attackers, as the Solana ecosystem grows, a lot of attackers who sort of have had successful scams or whatnot in these other ecosystems, those ecosystems have now sort of become less susceptible to those problems in many ways, and they will shift to these newer ecosystems where they feel like users are more naive and don't know how to avoid these problems. So like we should be learning from these other ecosystems. Absolutely.
It's just like Lixin was saying earlier, was that, security is all about making it so you are the most difficult and the most expensive to hack, basically. And that's the exact same thing with other blockchains. The other blockchains that have been around longer than the Solana ecosystem, they've experienced these hacks and issues. They have fixed them. And then eventually the newer chains become the lower hanging fruit. So the scammers and hackers just trickle down to other chains. It's the exact same thing of basic security. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's the whole, you don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun the slowest person in the group.
Exactly.
Make yourself more expensive to target so that somebody else is the target. I hate that, but it's true.
Sadly, it's true of hackers and scammers. Like they're just going to go for the lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's cool.
Oh man. Well, hey, this is I love. I mean, I just as we sort of get towards the end of the conversation, I want to call out some of the things that I've appreciated most. You mentioned earlier when you were going over sort of the multiple iterations of the Keystone Wallet that touchscreen and focus on user experience was there from the very beginning. I love that, and I think that speaks volumes to your background as a product developer, right? Like your focus on user experience. And it makes me excited for future iterations of the Keystone as well, right? I think it is very common, unfortunately, in the crypto space for products, software to be created with virtually no thought to the end user.
Yeah, goodness,
right?
It's a problem.
It is a problem, and it makes sense because we are we as a community, like the entire crypto community,
it's a new industry.
We tend to be very technical people, right? People who are engineers and software developers who maybe they extrapolate their own experience to the rest of humanity's experience, and that's just not the case. They think, well, I know how this works, so everyone should know how this works, and that's just not true. And good UX helps everyone, even engineers, right? Like better UX is good for all of us. So I love the focus on UX. I want to call that out, right? And then secondly, I love. I mean, this is really part of the first, but I love that you said good UX is part of security, right? Providing a good interface for me, the end user, that helps me understand what it is that I'm signing, what it is that I'm doing. It helps security, not hinders it, right? The harder you make it to use a device, the less secure that device is going to be because I might use it improperly. Right. If you make very clear, easy pathways for me to do the things that are safe, then I'm going to be a safer end user. And that's also fantastic. I also love that you mentioned the different users that you've been targeting with each iteration. Because I do think there is no one size fits all. Right. Like I think there's probably a one size fits most, but there's always these sort of niche groups that have their own specific needs. And it's great to know that people are thinking about those specific needs. Right. And yeah, I don't know. That's all super cool. Before we wrap, I want to make sure we get to talk about all the features of the Keystone that you want to talk about. Are there any other? You've mentioned a lot. We've dug into a couple. Are there other areas you want to explore with the remaining time? Okay. That you want to make sure users understand.
Okay. Maybe that's a little bit technical, but I wanted to share with you one of the key problems we want to solve also for Solana community.
Absolutely. Please.
Yeah. So I think a very important assumption of using hardware wallet is that your software wallet is hacked. Because if your software wallet is totally safe, if your laptop, your mobile phone is totally safe, you don't have to use a hardware wallet. You just use your software wallet. It's more convenient, right? So one of the key assumptions of using hardware wallet is that you should always assume that your software wallet is hacked. If you're assuming that, a big problem you need to figure out is that you need to fully verify your transaction on your hardware wallet. So we call this blind signing. Previously, there's huge problems in the EVM ecosystem for blind signing. If you are signing a simple transaction of sending Ether to other people, it's very simple. So you can verify that on Ledger. But if you are interacting with any DeFi protocol, you cannot fully see the transaction details on your hardware wallet. You just blindly signing the transaction on Ledger. And if you do that, and if your software wallet is hacked, and then you are hacked. So this is also a huge problem for the Solana community. And we want to solve that for the Solana. I think maybe that's too technical. Not a lot of people care that, but we really wanted to focusing on security. We really wanted to solve that blind signing issue for the Solana community. And I think that's one of the biggest thing we're trying to solve. And also, we're also trying to integrate with other software wallets like Phantom to cover more people, to serve more people. Those are the things that are coming for the Solana community. And for the existing features, I'm thinking that something I should mention is that we do have some other cool features like 3 secure elements and also 3 recovery phrase. And also we do have big touch screen. And also if we want to, by the way, I also should mention that if you are using your Keystone with your laptop, and if you don't have a camera or your camera doesn't work, you can also use USB to get your Keystone connected to your laptop to use that in another way. And also I should mention that maybe Nick, you can show your Keystone again. At the back of the Keystone, you can customize the device with your own NFT. So we are also collaborating with NFT communities in Solana community to allow people to customize their own NFT on their device. And also that's something we're working on. And we're also going to different conferences, including Solana conferences. And we definitely wanted to meet our users, meet our people and the developers there. That's all things we're working on. Maybe I'm talking too much. You're just asking about the features, but I really want to share with you guys the things we're going. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate sharing. I like we said a couple of times, our audience here is mostly devs. Everyone here, almost all of our listeners are pretty darn technical. And blind signing is hands down, it's a problem in the Solana ecosystem for most use cases. So like people that use hardware wallets have blind signing enabled. And yeah, having blind signing fixed and like making it so that's not an issue anymore is phenomenal. It's going to be great once all of that, like every hardware wallet supports clear signing, I guess would be the inverse of blind signing. Making it so that's just a bare minimum security feature that hardware wallet should have. And there's a lot of technical reasons to why, especially like with other hardware wallets, like why you have to enable blind signing, because you have these hardware devices that need to be able to interpret those instructions and transactions. And, if there's any Solana devs that know what programming on other chains look like, those transactions are structured very differently on Solana than EVM chains. So it's no small feat, which is why we still have blind signing required to be enabled for a lot of cases. And hopefully I'm bullish. I want blind signing to go away. It'd be awesome.
We want to solve that. We really want to solve that.
Someday.
And I really appreciate that you guys and your audiences will care about that. I really appreciate that because very few people appreciate this kind of efforts, but we really want to do that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of devs understand that problem because they know how easy it is to write a malicious smart contract, right? It's like I think most of us who have done any smart contract development know how sort of simple it is to just like add something in there that would never show up to the user and boom, like you've stolen funds. Of course there are some things that mitigate that, right? Like I think existing software wallets do some amount of displaying what assets are going to be transferred, what assets are going to be delegated, some basics, but more complicated transactions are certainly still very opaque, which is unfortunate. And there's a whole stack of important things that go into that, right? So even outside of the wallet knowing what's happening, there's sort of having more smart contract verification, but like program verification, so that we actually know what's happening there. We have the source code. It's been sort of, the build has been verified against the provided source code, and we know that it is in fact what that smart contract is on chain. There's a whole lot that plays into that, but it's great to know that you guys are also working on the problem and working with wallets that I think people know and trust, like Solflare and Phantom, to try and solve those kinds of problems. So Well, cool. This has been an awesome conversation. I certainly feel more confident in sort of using my Keystone. I'm probably going to beef up my security even more after this conversation and spread out my assets among multiple hardware wallets and set up a multi-sig between those wallets. So yeah, this is going to be good. You've helped me improve the way that I think about security while also giving me more confidence in the tools that I have at my disposal. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you too.
I wholeheartedly agree with that too.
Thank you for your time. Yeah. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap. Lixin, are there any last minute words you want to give to the listeners?
I think it's all good. It's all good. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good. Okay. Well, listeners, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks everyone for being here. Go pick up a Keystone Wallet and
get one of these sweet label plates. Like, they're pretty nice.
Yeah. Yours is pretty dope. I'm not gonna lie. That looks awesome.
Got my Mad Lad. All right. Thanks again, Lixin, for joining us. Catch everyone in the next episode.
Thank you, James.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yep. Thanks, Lixin.
Thank you.